The Lost Puppy. Max was a golden retriever puppy with soft, fluffy fur and big brown eyes. His wagging tail and playful nature brought joy to everyone he met, especially his owner, Thomas. Thomas was a young man with a kind heart and a love for animals. He had always wanted a dog, and Max was the perfect companion. On a sunny afternoon, Thomas decided to take Max for a walk in a new part of town. They strolled down the sidewalk, past tall buildings and busy streets. Max's nose twitched as he took in all the new smells, and he tugged at his leash, eager to explore. Thomas chuckled and let Max lead the way. As they walked, Max's excitement grew. He saw a squirrel scamper up a tree and a bird flying overhead. He wanted to chase them both, but Thomas held him back. They turned down a side street, and Max's ears perked up. He smelled something interesting. Without warning, Max pulled hard on his leash and darted across the street. Thomas ran after him, calling his name, but Max was too fast. He ran down the alleyway, chasing the scent of something delicious. Thomas caught up to Max just as he was about to round the corner. He grabbed Max's collar and pulled him back. Max whimpered and looked up at Thomas with sad eyes. He had been having so much fun, and now he was being held back. Thomas scolded Max gently, reminding him to stay close and be careful. Max wagged his tail and licked Thomas's hand, eager to make amends. Thomas smiled and rubbed Max's head. He loved Max, even when he was being naughty. Together, they continued down the street, Max walking obediently by Thomas's side. Thomas watched Max closely, making sure he didn't wander too far. But Max's curiosity had been piqued, and he couldn't resist exploring every nook and cranny. As they turned a corner, Max's ears perked up again. He heard something in the distance. Thomas couldn't hear it, but Max could. He pulled hard on his leash, wanting to investigate. Thomas hesitated for a moment, but then he decided to let Max go. He trusted his puppy, and he wanted him to have fun. Max barked happily and bounded down the street, his tail wagging excitedly. But as Max ran further and further away, Thomas began to worry. He couldn't see Max anymore, and he didn't know where he had gone. He called out Max's name, but there was no answer. Thomas's heart raced as he ran down the street, looking for Max. He searched everywhere, but there was no sign of his puppy. He felt lost and alone, and he wondered if he would ever find Max again. Thomas called out Max's name, but there was no response. His heart sank as he realized that Max had disappeared. He searched the streets and alleys, but Max was nowhere to be found. Thomas was starting to feel panicked. He asked people if they had seen Max, but no one had. He even went to the local animal shelters and vets, but Max wasn't there either. Thomas felt lost and alone without Max by his side. Meanwhile, Max had continued to run down the street, following the scent that had captured his attention. He had never been this far from Thomas before, and he was starting to feel scared. He barked for help, but no one seemed to hear him. As Max walked around, he saw lots of people and other dogs, but he didn't recognize any of them. He tried to bark for help, but no one seemed to understand him. He felt lost and alone, and he wondered if he would ever find his way back to Thomas. Night began to fall, and Max started to feel cold and hungry. He looked for a place to rest but couldn't find one. He missed Thomas and wished he was back with him. Max curled up under a bush and tried to sleep. Meanwhile, Thomas was still looking for Max. He was starting to lose hope, but he couldn't give up. He missed Max terribly and couldn't imagine life without him. He continued to ask people if they had seen Max, hoping for a breakthrough. As the night wore on, Thomas grew more and more worried. He knew Max needed him, but he couldn't find him. He decided to put up posters around the town with Max's picture and his contact information, hoping that someone would see them and call him. Days passed, but there was still no sign of Max. Thomas felt hopeless and alone, and he missed Max more than ever. He spent his days putting up more posters and searching for Max, but he was starting to lose hope. Max, on the other hand, was getting weaker and weaker. He had been without food or water for days, and he was starting to lose hope too. He missed Thomas and wished he could see him again. Max knew that he needed help, but he didn't know how to get it. Max had been wandering around the streets for days, feeling weak and hopeless. He had given up hope of ever seeing Thomas again, but he knew he couldn't just give up. He had to keep going and keep searching for a way out. As Max walked down the street, he heard a sound that caught his attention. It was a faint barking in the distance. Max's heart leaped with excitement as he realized that it could be Thomas. He barked back, hoping that Thomas would hear him. Thomas had spent every waking moment searching for Max. He was exhausted and had almost given up hope. But as he walked down the street, he heard a barking sound in the distance. It was faint, but he could hear it. He followed the sound, hoping that it was Max. As Thomas turned a corner, he saw a small, weak dog lying under a bush. It was Max. Thomas rushed over to him and scooped him up in his arms. Max licked Thomas's face, and Thomas knew that everything was going to be okay. Thomas took Max to the vet, where he received food, water, and medical attention. The vet told Thomas that Max was severely dehydrated and malnourished but would be okay with some rest and care. Thomas took Max home and spent the next few days nursing him back to health. He gave him plenty of food and water and showered him with love and attention. Max was finally back where he belonged, with his owner and best friend. As Max regained his strength, Thomas began to realize how much he loved and depended on him. He realized that he couldn't imagine life without Max by his side. They went on long walks together, played fetch, and cuddled on the couch. One day, as they were walking in the park, Thomas looked down at Max and saw something shiny on his collar. It was a tag that he had never noticed before. He read the tag, and it had a phone number on it. Thomas called the number, and a woman answered. She explained that she had lost her dog a few weeks ago and had been searching for him ever since. She had put up posters and gone to the local animal shelters, but she couldn't find him. Thomas realized that Max must have picked up the woman's dog's collar, which is why he had been following the scent. Thomas arranged to meet the woman, and they exchanged the dogs. As Thomas watched the woman walk away with her dog, he felt a pang of sadness. He realized that he loved Max more than he had ever realized before and didn't want to lose him. From that day on, Thomas made a promise to always take care of Max and never let him out of his sight again. Max had brought so much joy and love into his life, and he couldn't imagine living without him.